Week 15. Most of you embarked on your playoff journey last week. Some of you will begin your playoff voyage this week. And some of you last weekend may have suffered a heartbreaking and devastating playoff loss. For you fans, I'm truly sorry. Now, that brings us to some playoff horror stories. Everybody's had some tough, rough playoff losses. I've read about some crazy stories online, heard some from some friends. Now, a friend of mine had a crazy playoff horror story happen to him just this past weekend, and I'm going to tell you about it. So, for the sake of the story, let's call my friend, well, let's just call him Steve. Fairly common name. Anyways, Steve is in a league. He actually owns the best record in the league. Now, he's tied with a guy. They're both 10-3, so technically he's second because he's behind by like 40 points. So, second place in the league, should get a bye week going into the playoffs last weekend. But no, for some crazy reason, the league that he's in and the commissioner that is in that league has the playoffs set up in some wacky way where he actually doesn't get a bye week and has to play in the first week of the playoffs. Weird, huh? Exactly. So, side note, when you're joining your league next year, watch out for those shady commissioners that involve in their little weird settings in their playoffs and shady business, and make sure you don't join a league with a weird commissioner like that, Trey Watts. Now, back to the story. Steve ended up sending out a good, solid team, great team. And you know what? The team that he was playing, they didn't have very good guys. He's going into Monday night. He's ahead by 15 points. He's got Wes Welker going. The other guy's got some tight end. No problem. He's got it wrapped up. Well, some of you may have seen the game on Monday night. And the Patriots, well, you may know this guy named Tom Brady. And unfortunately, Tom Brady had a case of amnesia and forgot who his favorite receiver is last weekend, and forgot that Wes Welker was his best receiver and started throwing into some stupid tight end named Aaron Hernandez. And because of that, Aaron Hernandez has some stupid monster game, and Wes Welker had some average day. Sure, scored some points, but not very many. He only had 8. Aaron Hernandez has a monster day, 26, and my friend Steve ends up losing by 2 points. 2 points in the playoffs. Then Steve calls me, he's like, you know what? This is crazy. This is BS. I should have had a bye week. Stupid commissioner, stupid league. I don't even want to play fantasy football anymore. I don't even want to do the, you know what? I don't even want to do the show. And you know what? This is ridiculous. I mean, I just,
Whoa, Steve, calm down. Have a drink of water. It's going to be okay. It's just fantasy football.
All right.
You good?
We got this. Yeah. Who that?
You know who that is?
All right. Fantasy football. Week 15. The playoffs are here, and you are in them. Make it count. School is in session. Our first matchup of the week, the Thursday night game, brings us the Cincinnati Bengals at the Philadelphia Eagles. You know, Nick Foles is filled in, and he's filling in the rest of the season. He hasn't looked too bad, but against a tough Bengals defense, I'm not liking too many people on the Eagles. Really, the only one I give a shot to is Bryce Brown, and I don't even like him that much. He's going against a tough Bengals defense. On the Bengals side of the ball, I actually do like Andy Dalton, Green Ellis, and of course A.J. Green. And this week, if you need a strong performance out of a tight end, don't forget about Jermaine Gresham. And that brings us to the Green Bay Packers at the Chicago Bears. Now, a lot's going to depend for the Chicago Bears on whether Jay Cutler plays or not. You may have seen the hit he took last week. He might not play this week. If he doesn't play, the only one I like on the Bears is Matt Forte, because they're going to have to rely on the run game heavily. If he does play, I still do like Matt Forte because Green Bay's not the greatest against the run. And then if Cutler does play, you got to love Brandon Marshall. That guy is a monster, but only when Cutler plays. Packers side of the ball, you got to like Aaron Rodgers. The Bears defense is not that scary right now. Not a big fan of Green at running back or any of the Green Bay running backs because the Bears' run defense is decent. But you do got to like Greg Jennings, Randall Cobb. Jordy Nelson's probably still out, and if he is, then maybe even start James Jones, and if you're in a deep league. I'm not a big fan of Jermichael Finley. That brings us to the Indianapolis Colts at the Houston Texans. If you watched the game last Monday night, you saw the Texans' defense, and it looked atrocious. Their defense didn't look like it could stop anybody. Their defense probably couldn't stop little kids from crossing the street, even if they were a crossing guard. So, for that fact, I actually do like Andrew Luck and Reggie Wayne and a couple other of the receivers on the Indianapolis side of the ball, Hilton, and you might even like Avery. On the Texans side of the ball, offense even looked disappointing to me last week. Matt Schaub, you may have to start him. The Colts defense isn't that good. Arian Foster, I think, will actually have an above-average day. And, of course, Andre Johnson, Owen Daniels as well. I think it will be a little bit more of a shootout, and that's just because neither of these defenses are very good. And that brings us to the Denver Broncos at the Baltimore Ravens. Broncos side of the ball, Peyton Manning has looked amazing all year long. The Ravens defense is not that scary anymore. Honestly, I think he's going to have an above-average game, as well as Knowshon Moreno. I think it's going to surprise people. I actually think he may perform better than Ray Rice this week, surprisingly. Now, Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, both of them should get quite a few catches. Look for D. Thomas to have a little bit more points. He probably gets in the end zone an extra time. And on the Ravens side of the ball, not a huge fan of really any of them. Joe Flacco has been playing poorly the last couple of weeks. The only receiver I like on that team right now is Anquan Boldin. And Ray Rice, you've got to start him if you have him. He can get you some yards, but the Broncos defense is a tough matchup. Don't count on much. And now that brings us to the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Miami Dolphins. Two teams that are tough to pick who's going to score you some points on them, because honestly, neither of these teams are very good. And for that reason, there's going to be some points scored because neither team is going to be able to really stop the other one probably. Unfortunately, on the Jaguars side of the ball, who's going to be running the ball? MJD's probably not going to be back. Every other running back for them gets hurt. So you don't start any of their running backs, and they have a weak running back core now because everybody's injured. So with that being said, you've got to like Cecil Shorts and even Justin Blackmon in a long shot at receiver. The Dolphins' defense is pretty tough, but they don't have a running game. They're going to have to pass, and especially if they fall behind, they're definitely going to have to pass. Dolphins side of the ball, not a big fan of any of them. Bush and Thomas split too much time at running back to really be fond of either of them. But honestly, I think Reggie Bush will have one breakout play that's going to make it a fantasy-worthy day for him. So you may look to start him if you're in a running back crunch. And Hartline maybe is a receiver you start, but there's probably a lot of better options this week. And that brings us to the Washington Redskins at the Cleveland Browns. On the Washington side of the ball, RG3 is hurt. Is he going to play this week? Maybe. I don't think so. And if he doesn't play, the only one on the Redskins team that you might want to start would be Alfred Morris. Of course, he's done well at running back this year, and the Browns don't have the greatest rush defense. If he does play, then you probably have to start him, even though he's going to be playing on an injury. And if he does play, then you do like Pierre Garçon and Santana Moss. And on the Cleveland side of the ball, I actually think Brandon Weeden's going to have a pretty good game, especially if RG3 doesn't play. They're going to have a tough time keeping their offense on the field, and I think Brandon Weeden will do well. Trent Richardson should also do well as Josh Gordon. And if you're struggling in a tight end and you want to pull something crazy out of the hat, look at Ben Watson. I think he actually will have an above-average game this week. And that brings us to the Minnesota Vikings at the St. Louis Rams. Honestly, I see this as a very defensive-oriented game this week. I don't think there's going to be a ton of points scored, really, for a lot of these players involved. On the Viking side of the ball, really the only one you may start is Adrian Peterson. I honestly think Kyle Rudolph will have a pretty good game this week against the Rams. I think he may be the only other Viking that you start. Rams side of the ball, against a tough Vikings defense, honestly, the only one you start is Gibson. And now that brings us to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the New Orleans Saints. Wow. The New Orleans Saints last week couldn't stop a horrible Eli Manning passing offense, so why should they be able to stop Josh Freeman and the Bucs? And especially their running defense is horrible. How are they going to stop Doug Martin? So honestly, I pretty much like all the Buccaneers. Freeman, Martin, Vincent Jackson, even Williams. Dallas Clark should even get in on some action. Now, granted, somebody is not going to score as many points as the other guy, but they all should have above-average days. On the Saints side of the ball, just because they're going to be playing catch-up, it should be a shootout. I do like Breeze. I like Sproles. I like Colston. I like Lance Moore, and, of course, Jimmy Graham. And that brings us to the New York Giants at the Atlanta Falcons. On the Giants side of the ball, wow, Eli Manning has been up and down, and last week, of course, had a great game. Now, you might start him, but darn it, you can't trust him. and you can't believe in them, and especially against a tough Falcons defense, you may have a better option at quarterback this week. Now, David Wilson looked impressive last week, and if he's going to touch the ball as often as he did, I would definitely start that guy no matter who he's playing. On the receiving side of the ball, Nix and Victor Cruz should get their touches. One of them, if not both, should at least get a touchdown. I think they'll do average, if not a little bit above average. Falcons side of the ball, I'm not a big fan of Matt Ryan, Turner, or Rodgers. The Giants do have a pretty good run defense, so the only way that the Falcons will probably be able to get it done is through the air. So, of course, you got to like Julio Jones, Roddy White, and Tony Gonzalez. And that brings us to the Seattle Seahawks at the Buffalo Bills. If you watched the Seahawks game last week, you saw the shola panking they put on the Arizona Cardinals. That's right, the shola panking. That's a cross between a shellacking and a spanking. And boy, did they put that shola panking down last week. This week, they play the Bills. The Bills have a better offense and maybe not much of a better defense. So the Seahawks still should do some things on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're going to hurt a lot of the Bills' offensive players. I don't like too many of them. C.J. Spiller I don't like, but you probably got to start him because there's always a chance he'll bust off for a 50-yard run and a touchdown. Stevie Johnson, I do like him. He will get his targets. Seahawks side of the ball, you got to love Marshawn Lynch, beast mode. And actually, I do like their tight end Wilson this week. Up next is the Carolina Panthers at the San Diego Superchargers. Cam Newton looked impressive last week, and he'll need to be impressive again against a tough Charger defense, and I think he will be. On the running backs, I don't like any of them. Steve Smith, you got to like, and I also do like their tight end Olsen. On the Chargers side of the ball, man, Phillip Rivers has been up and down. You know, I think he'll do all right this week, but I don't think he's going to do great. Ryan Matthews has been a huge disappointment. Honestly, the end zone to him is like a belt on a fat guy. I'm not sure if he's seen it at all this year. And Malcolm Floyd, you know, too inconsistent. Honestly, if you got Denario Alexander, if you were lucky enough to sign him the last few weeks out of waivers, I'd start that guy. But he's probably about one of the only Chargers I start this week. And that brings us to the Detroit Lions at the Arizona Cardinals. If you watched last week, you've realized, like the professor did, the Cardinals have thrown in the towel for this season. And for that reason, the Lions side of the ball, I like Matt Stafford, I like LaShore, I like Calvin Johnson, and I like Pettigrew at tight end. Now, their Scheffler, another one of their tight ends, has been getting a lot of looks at receiver. He's been getting a lot of targets. So if you need to fill in at a tight end or at a flex position in your league, you may look at Scheffler this week as well. On the Cardinals side of the ball, let me see, do I have any of the Cardinals starting this week? Hell no. No, don't start any Cardinals. And now we have the Kansas City Chiefs at the Oakland Raiders. In Kansas City, Brady Quinn's still throwing the ball. You can't really like too much of what he's got going on. The Raiders' defense isn't that good, but neither are Brady Quinn's receivers. The only one I really like on Kansas City this week is going to be Jamal Charles. On the Oakland side of the ball, I actually do like a few of the Oakland players because they are going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. I think Palmer will have a good game, and that's because McFadden's back. He should have a good game, as well as Denario Alexander. Now, I do think Brandon Myers gets it going again after a disappointing week last week. I think he'll be back to his usual above-average points. Up next, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Dallas Cowboys. Roethlisberger was healthy last week and played and put up a respectable 22 points. Romo has been decent the last few weeks as well. So I like both of them in this. I think they're both going to score above average points. The running back position, I like DeMarco Murray on the Cowboys side of the ball. Not a big fan of any of the Pittsburgh running backs because they all share way too much time. The wide receiver position, I do like Wallace. I do like Miller, the tight end on the Steelers. Cowboys, it's going to be tough. You got to like Miles Austin. Is Dez Bryant going to play? He may be out this weekend. If he's out, you got to look for someone like Ogletree to step up. And, of course, if you've got Witten at tight end, you're going to be starting him because without Dez Bryant, they're going to be getting Austin and Witten the ball a lot. That brings us to the Sunday night matchup, the San Francisco 49ers at the New England Patriots. Now, the professor has one rule all year, and that is do not start anybody against the San Francisco 49ers defense. Well, that one rule for this week you might bend it a little bit because there is Tom Brady. He's pretty good, along with Wes Welker and, this Hernandez guy and Brandon Lloyd. Now, I don't like all of them. I honestly think Hernandez will do well. I think Welker will do well in their little short passing game. I think Ridley, he might have one or two breakout plays, but I think the Niners are going to keep a good reps on him. Niners side of the ball, I think Bill Belichick's defense is going to confuse Kaepernick a little bit. I like Gore, I like Crabtree, but that's about it on the 49ers side of the ball. And that brings us to our Monday night game, which is the New York Jets at the Tennessee Titans. Now, is Sanchez still playing, and why, if he is, and when are they going to bring in Tebow? What's going on in New York? Do they even know? You can't like their quarterback. You can't like any of their receivers. Sean Green's been putting up some numbers the last couple of weeks, so I do like him against a weak Titans defense. I do like their tight end Keller. He's one of their only consistent guys receiving the ball. On the Titan side of the ball, not too much to like. Chris Johnson should do pretty good. Nate Washington should have average to above average numbers, as well as Kendall Wright. I think Jared Cook, the tight end, will actually have above average numbers as well. But really nothing special here in this game. Thanks for watching the Week 15 Playoff Edition Matchup Show. Now, folks, just remember this. It is fantasy football. And no matter how hard you've prepared, how well coached your team is, how much you trained in the offseason, how much you put into preparation for the draft, how much and how well coached your team has been all season, it comes down to this. So this week, you set your best lineup, but you have to understand the players do the rest. So good luck to you and your fantasy football team this week. And as always, like the video, subscribe to our channel for future updates, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. The other fantasy guys would like to wish you and your playoff team the best of luck in your playoff run.